you for joining Six Sigma Legal Process Improvement. This is going to be a really brief overview of Six Sigma and how you can use it to improve legal processes. Because it's more about Six Sigma and how you can apply it to different job functions. There are some specific programs, but in this particular session, we're just going to go over the basics. Now, the purpose of this session is to allow you as a legal professional to understand the importance of incorporating an effective quality management program into your job functions, because the successful implementation of a quality management program will result in improved job performance, and it will help you reduce costs because you will be more efficient, your billable hours will increase, and it also will reduce the risk associated with handling a variety of legal. So in this particular session, you will learn about what Six Sigma is, the Six Sigma quality principles, some common errors that are alleged in malpractice claims, some common errors in the legal process, some effective tools and techniques for legal process improvement, some specific uses in e-discovery, specific uses in document production, litigation support, and then how you can create a competitive edge in your career with using Six Sigma. So let's first start off by understanding what Six Sigma is. The core philosophy of Six Sigma is that it emphasizes quantifiable measurements. It allows for incorporating the customer requirements into how you handle your job and the various legal processes. It focuses on time reductions, focuses on reducing non-value added services. So for you as a paralegal, it means focusing on reducing the time you spend on non-billable functions. And then it also will result in you becoming a project or a process expert, because the focus is to improve and to continuously improve. And when you continuously improve on something by doing it over and over again, you will eventually become an expert at that. So these are the Six Sigma quality principles. The customer is key. Teamwork is also extremely important, and improvement. Now, these are some common errors alleged in malpractice claims. So when we're talking about Six Sigma and reducing errors, these are the errors that you want to reduce, because these are the errors that malpractice insurance providers, legal malpractice insurance providers, and others that study issues that occur in law firms and legal organizations, these are the biggies. So these are things you want to keep an eye out for and reduce in your particular job. Missed deadlines, stress and substance abuse, because it leads to these other issues: poor client relations, ineffective client screening, inadequate research and investigation, conflicts of interest and conflicts of matter, inappropriate involvement in client interests, lack of adequate documentation of work, zealous efforts to collect a fee, and then an unwillingness to even believe that a malpractice suit will be filed, which also leads to these other areas, because if a person doesn't think that a malpractice suit will be filed, then they may not return phone calls to clients thinking it's unnecessary, or respond to inquiries via email or mail from clients because they may not think it's important and they don't think anything's going to happen, which it would be a very big mistake to make, because it's actually a model rule of professional conduct that a client has to be kept in the loop when it is reasonable. So that unwillingness to believe a malpractice suit will be filed leads to some of these other issues. These are some common errors in the legal process. Missed deadlines, and now these are some typical errors related to missed deadlines. Data entry errors, failure to use file review dates, absence of a backup calendar, procrastinating to the last minute to file documents. And a solution to this would be a cohesive system and procedures related to calendaring. Stress is huge. Typical errors or issues related to stress is measuring your worth based on number of billable hours. So although the Six Sigma for paralegals concepts heavily focuses on improving efficiency and productivity, it does not mean to turn you into just this ball of stress while you're doing it. It just teaches you how to work smarter, so you reduce the time you're spending on non-value added services. Also, the inability to adjust schedule during personal times of crisis. If you're having a baby, if your spouse is having a baby, if you have a sick parent, if you're just overwhelmed, if you have a huge workload, you may feel guilty for taking time off from work, but that leads to stress and burnout. So a solution to this would be to know the signs of burnout and take time off, or implement some other stress management plan, and if necessary, seek out professional help. Another issue in legal processes is ineffective client screening. A typical error related to ineffective client screening is not paying attention to warning signs and red flags presented during client interviewing. A solution to this would be to create and to adhere to company-wide screening questions. Another issue is lack of documentation of work. Typical errors related to this particular issue is lost files, documents, and or evidence. Solution would be to create an electronic document management system. It's really difficult to lose an electronic file unless for some reason you name it something and you don't remember what you named the file. If you put a letter in wrong, then it may be difficult to find. But that creating an electronic document management system is going to help reduce losing files. Because when you are filing files and evidence in a physical place, not keeping track of it electronically, when it's possible, someone may check it out, forget to check it back in, or misfile it. And so that causes that particular information just to be lost or misplaced. Another issue is inadequate research and investigation. Issues and errors related to that are failure to know or properly apply the law, failure to know or ascertain a deadline, inadequate discovery of facts or inadequate investigation, planning error and choice of procedures. And so a solution to this particular issue would be to read, study, and continuously learn to stay abreast of changes in the law. This is extremely important for paralegals because unless you belong to a paralegal association, or if you're in the state of California, you're not required to take any continuing legal education. So you may be really lax in staying on top of changes. So it's really important to be proactive with reading, studying, and just learning any changes that are going on in your particular practice area, and also with dealing with technology. Another issue that's common in legal processes is conflicts of interest and conflicts of matter. Errors related to this are representation of opposing theories of law. This will happen like when your firm takes on a client, and it's representing someone where it's an opposing theory of a law from a previous client, or it's another case that's being worked on. So you really don't have control over that really, because you don't choose clients. But the other one here, the personal involvement in clients' business interests, can occur, and you can contribute to this as a paralegal. Solutions to these particular issues is to do a thorough conflict check and to quickly disclose any potential conflicts. If you worked on a particular case at a particular other firm, or if your firm doesn't know that you actually worked on an opposing side of law, it's important to disclose that as soon as possible. Another issue, and this is a biggie, especially when you're dealing with Six Sigma, because Six Sigma again focuses heavily on the customer. So poor client relations is huge, and these are some typical errors. Failure to obtain client consent, failure to follow client's instructions, improper withdrawal of representation, libel or slander, malicious prosecution of abusive process, failure to inform a client of a case development, failure to respond to client phone calls and correspondence. It's huge. It's so huge, at an ABA Tech show, they discussed it. They just talked about it with lawyers as far as poor client relations, and understanding that providing good legal services goes beyond being really proficient in an area of law, that it has to incorporate good legal services has to incorporate the customer and how to take care of the customer and relate to them. Really big. Now, when you're talking about Six Sigma again, customer quality is derived from different areas. But most importantly is to understand that customer-driven quality focuses on quality from the perception of the client. So with this, you have to determine who the client is. The client is not the judge. The client is not the jury. The client is not the court personnel or the opposing counsel. So when dealing with legal processes, to just solely focus on how to get things lined up correctly to meet the court procedures or responding to opposing counsel phone calls and things of that nature, but not responding to client phone calls is really, not effective way to deal with clients, because actually it's a rule of professional conduct that a client has to be kept in a loop and that they are entitled to receive status updates and to make decisions on how their case is carried out. So any approach to quality without the customer is really useless because the client has to be kept at the focal point. And this is just a continuous improvement that needs to be implemented into how legal processes are handled. This is an example of how you can keep the client at the focal point and why it's important. And it is going to require somewhat of a paradigm shift. But once it's done, results are going to be pretty much immediate. These are two different examples of keeping the client at the focal point. When the business is a client and when an individual is a client. When and what can happen when the client is not kept at the focal point. Here in this diagram in the middle, you'll see the client is in the middle. Then you see the strategy around the client, the execution of the strategy around that, and then the overall case management is on the peripheral. So the client is always kept in the focal point, even when dealing with the execution and the strategy, case strategy and case management. Now, when you are dealing with the business as a client and you ignore that client's business model when you're handling legal matters for them, what's going to happen is that you're going to eventually handle a case, a matter, in a way that the business would not be too happy with. Whether that means waiting maybe 10 days after something is legally able to be filed because the business wants to give their clients a little bit of extra time, if you're dealing with repossession or whatever the case may be. This can result in the loss of that particular client, referrals from that client. Also, it can lead to malpractice suits and complaints to the bar. Now, when the individual is a client and you ignore their communication style and you fail to provide status updates and keep them in the loop of the case, this can result in undisclosed information coming out at trial or deposition, which will be extremely disastrous, and it may result in creating another case, or worst case scenario, losing that particular case. So important method that you can use just to keep this in mind and keep the client at the focal point is use the communication cycle. This is CALLS. This is a method, just the acronym, just remember CALLS, C-A-L-L-S. It stands for communicate, ask, listen, learn, and see. So you can see here with this communication style, you have this continuous communication going on between the attorney and paralegal or the staff at the law firm and the client, and it's continuous. So you're communicating with each other. There's questions that are being asked when more information is needed, or answering those questions that are asked by the client, listening to the client and information that they're providing, learning, because there's always something that can be learned, and then seeing, looking at the client with compassion, because you as a paralegal, your firm, your attorney, you're working. It's a job for you to handle a particular case. But so the person that hired your firm, they're going through that particular issue, and it can be extremely emotional for them. So just being compassionate and looking at things from their eyes can actually help you sometimes, a lot of times, communicate with them better and just see the case in a different light than you may have seen it. Especially if you deal with the same type of case over and over again, you just might just get numb to it and just just go through the routine of handling a particular. So these are some process improvement tools and techniques: electronic calendaring systems, document automation, instantaneous billing. You can use Six Sigma in e-discovery phases, document production, management, preparation and filing, litigation support. You can use it during witness and client interviewing, legal research, fact finding and investigation. And for you as a paralegal, you can use it overall in your career to create a competitive advantage, because any employer is going to be very, very happy and look at you very favorable when they understand that you are focused on quality in how you handle your specific functions, but not only improving quality, but also that you understand what an attorney's obligations are when communicating with their client. You also have an understanding of risk as far as avoiding malpractice suits, and you are handling your job in a way to reduce those particular risks. It's a case study of a firm that has implemented Six Sigma, and these are some different things that they've done at their particular company. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via Skype, email, or on the website. There's a chat and a call feature.